Welcome, everybody, to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I am the executive editor of Sox Prospects, and I'm joined, as always, by our director of scouting, who has spent the past week in the churn of the waiver wire. But we would never let him get claimed. The one and only Ian Kundle. Ian, playoff baseball has been fun to watch. Unfortunately, it does not include the Boston Red Sox, but some things are happening, plenty being discussed. I think we're kind of like we're approaching the first tee of the offseason is kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, I think we're on the driving range right now with all these little moves. There's some churning and burning going on. The stuff that we kind of expected Chaim Bloom to be doing for a while. It seems like he's kind of at the middle to end of last season, and now in the offseason he's getting comfortable kind of churning that bottom of that roster. And then I think it seems like it's kind of a waiting game now until the end of the World Series, with then the big stuff happens, the Bogarts negotiations, which I know maybe we'll talk about that a little bit, since everyone seems to be talking about it, but
I guess.
But yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting few weeks. Kind of, I guess, just enjoy the end of the baseball playoffs, or I guess we're kind of in the middle right now, but enjoy the baseball playoffs, and then the hard stuff starts, because it's going to be a fascinating offseason.
It is,
watching these baseball playoffs and seeing kind of like the gap between the Red Sox and these teams that are in contention right now. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of work to be done. It's going to be very interesting to see how they kind of try to close that gap.
And I think they know that. And we could talk. Let's do the intro stuff, and then we'll talk about maybe we can start with the Chaim Bloom press conference, and some of the things he said there. But of course, if you want to support the show, first off, you're starting to do that by downloading and listening or streaming. We appreciate you. You all may have noticed that we are ad supported now. So, one at the beginning, one at the end. We're not going to go crazy with it, but, thank you. Look, getting remunerated for the time we spend on this is something that is very helpful. So, thank you for bearing with us, adding that to the show. And of course, you can tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell, your dog sitter who bailed on you at the last minute right before you're about to go to California. Remind me to tell you about that, Ian. Tell everyone about the show. And of course, you can rate and review us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen. And of course, if you want to support us monetarily, you can do so by going to patreon.com/SoxProspects and get some neat perks by pledging a certain amount per episode. Get some things like, we got to figure out when we're going to do our Bad News Bears episode, Ian. We've got the Patreon game updates on there. We've got rankings content that's up there. That I'm now realizing I may not have done for the October update. So I will get right on that if I haven't. But yeah, we're definitely worth your while. If you want to support the show, you can do it for as little as $1 an episode. And finally, send your emails. If you want to hear us talk about something, have a question, have a thought, send it to podcast@soxprospects.com. We want to talk about what you want to hear about. The simpler emails are a little better, but maybe at some point this offseason we'll tear through. We've got kind of a backlog of the here's an idea for a 20-minute conversation you can have type emails. Maybe we'll do that for an episode this off season, but I guess like we promised, let's jump in with the end of season news, which is not really news yet. It's just kind of more reaction to what is happening. And on the one hand, you had the Chaim Bloom presser where there were different things that came out of it. And I don't know what your kind of takeaway conclusions were. But it seemed to me, and this is what I was about to say earlier, was I think they understand that there is a lot of work to do. We kind of got the preview of this when like Kike Hernandez signed his extension and was like, yeah, basically they told me we're going to be a lot better next year. But I think a lot of it, Ian, is just, for example, the comment about the catching situation struck me as interesting because Bloom came right out and said the catcher is a position they're going to look to potentially upgrade this offseason.
Yeah, that was interesting to me because that was one areas that I was like, I'm kind of fine with what they have.
And he could have also said that and hit his, played his hand closer to his chest, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where this is, keep in mind, this is a front office where nothing has leaked. during the whole time Bloom has been here.
No, they keep things very close to the vest.
And so for him to come out and say that, where he easily could have said, even without committing to a McGuire Wong platoon, we're happy with what we've seen out of them, but you never know what's going to come along.
Well, exactly. You're always looking for upgrades.
Exactly.
You never know what's going to come along. Yeah.
And for him to come out and say, and look, I don't take that as they're going to trade for Sean Murphy. I think that ship has kind of sailed. I don't know what you think, Ian.
I just think that
Murphy's like top 40 on the Fangraphs trade value.
The opportunity, it's going to cost so much now.
But put it this way, if you want to trade for him, Oakland is going to ask for.
They're going to ask for Meyer.
They're going to ask for Meyer.
Yeah, or
I think you say no.
Both, probably they'll probably ask for like Meyer and Blaze. They'd want like both of them.
And they're going to insist on one, because this is a cost-controlled catcher who can both hit and defend.
Yeah,
they don't grow on trees.
No.
There's a tier of catcher right now that's Adley and Real Muto. And then Murphy might be the best of that next tier. He's certainly in it. I don't know if you think that that's wrong or not, but.
I mean, if we're talking about two-way performer, I think so. Yeah.
Or just catcher generally.
He does everything well.
Yeah.
And his batted ball data shows that there's more offensive upside if he was in a better park, I think.
Yep. But anyway, not to go off on a Sean Murphy tangent, but it does seem like there's going to be a lot happening, and they have the money to do it. They've got at least, depending on what the budget is, at minimum, they've got $80 million to play with. Granted, that includes signing a shortstop, whether it's re-signing Bogarts or what. If you're going to extend Devers, that's included in theory, because you have to sign him to a contract for next year anyway. That's going to include a pretty big pay raise. But yeah, they've got a lot of money to work with. And, you look at the 40 man and there's plenty of guys, like we've said, they can get rid of. And that's part of why we've got the end of the roster churn. We're going to talk about it in a little bit. But did you have any other takeaways from the presser, Ian, other than kind of the big picture? This offseason is going to be very fun. I
thought it was interesting how kind of open they were about wanting to go after Bogarts. I think they were very that they made it clear that they really want him. And I think it kind of, it's put things in an interesting position in the sense that I feel like it kind of ramped up that there would be even more disappointment than there already would be if for some reason that deal doesn't work out.
Yep.
Because it's one thing to say where it's free agency, anything can happen. You never know. Blah,
you
blah,
could have hedged that one too. That's the same thought I had.
Because of the timing, we can talk to him right now. We want to work on this right away. Our position hasn't changed. We want to get a deal done as soon as possible.
It's the only thing we can do right now.
Right. But it's just interesting to come out and say that, because I just I don't see Scott Boras playing ball at all. That's not his MO at all. I don't think he would let Bogarts get this close to free agency and then lock him up before he can test the market. That just doesn't
unless they get what they think market value is.
Right. And I don't
think they'll do that.
The number I think he's going to want 200 million.
Oh yeah. No, he's going
and I don't think I would be comfortable going there, but
that would be what, 8 years, or would you do that over 7?
I think 7,200 is about
7,200,
which is it's 20. It's 20.
I love Xander.
It's just that's basically committing till he's 37, 38 years old.
Yeah. Give me Xander on a 5-year deal with a player option, maybe.
Yeah, I think 5 years is what my idea would be. 5 years. I would go for 5. I think I could do 150, 30 a year. I'd rather do that.
You would do 30 over 5. Interesting.
I think so. Yeah.
Interesting.
But I don't think I would do 7,200. It's too long. It's too much. So that's going to be fascinating to see where that goes. I just thought the language they used talking about that, though, talking about how we want to work on that right now and we'd like to get it done if we can, is kind of interesting.
Which then combined with Bogarts saying in interviews that as far as he knew, they had not talked to him about it. But you got to keep this in mind too, because I think what happened, because then the report came out later that they had actually opened.
Well, and then there was the report that they're going to he's going to meet with them when he comes back from Aruba. But it was the report was weird because it framed it like he's there on vacation. It's no, I'm pretty sure he lives there.
He lives in Aruba, friends.
Yeah.
It's, or maybe he's just there to see family or something on a short trip. If I went to New Hampshire and you were going to talk to me when I got back from New Hampshire, I don't live there anymore, but yeah, I am intrigued to see how this plays out because I think it would be good if they can get Bogaerts to sign, I guess what would be an extension, right? Before he even hits free agency at a price that they're okay with. That's a win. That's a W. At a price that they are comfortable with. Does he stay at short the whole time? I don't know. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. You sign him at a price that in year 6 of the deal, you're okay with him being the left fielder, I think, or the second baseman or the third baseman or something. You don't sign him to be the team's starting shortstop, in perpetuity. But yeah, there's a lot happening, and I guess Ian, maybe that's.
Well, and I think just briefly on that, like just not Bogaerts in general, or I think that the one thing that and maybe we'll talk about this as we get closer to the World Series is like I think this year speed matters. Like,
oh yeah,
I think they need to. It seemed like last year there were other teams were setting the market and they were kind of left like
just
being a little like reactionary, and I think this year there will be benefits to being the ones who set the market because I think it shows both, other teams and frankly other players that you're interested in signing that like we mean business. And that's why I think they need to like get something done big early, whether it be extending Bogaerts, going out and getting like, a high end pitcher, signing a high end outfielder, like get something done as soon as free agency kicks off to kind of set the tone for what is going to be a very important offseason.
I think they've been comfortable sitting back and waiting for the value add. Or striking when the value add is there. And I think that's because for example, last year, I think they probably called correctly that Story's market wasn't developing the way that Story wanted to, and they might be able to wait and get him at a better price. And
I think it's also easier when you have fewer holes to fill. Like when you're trying to churn over like, 6, 7, 8 MLB spots, that's a lot more difficult in my opinion.
I think that at minimum, there's going to be 5 key additions on the Major League roster. And that's just if they don't do trades. Right. And they also I think they need to work on paying Devers, but that might be a later in the offseason thing when it's like, hey, so Rafi, look at what we just did. You want to stay?
Right. But that's the thing is like, I almost feel like you kind of backburner the Devers thing because it's a lot easier, I think, to lock him up after who else you've gone out and gotten. And frankly, and I know Lou Merlone's been all over this as his reasoning for not prioritizing extending Devers is he wants the cheaper cap hit with Devers this year so you can spend more on other guys this year.
Well, what you do when you sign him is you say, all right, we're going to sign you to a 1-year deal. And it's not the thing anymore. You don't have to wait until like the first day after opening day to sign the extension for it to not count. You can like sign him to a 1-year deal and then say, okay, we're signing you an extension that starts in 2024.
So you have him do like play this year out on his ARB year. And then
so this year you play on you sign him to the 1-year ARB contract at a number that everyone's fine with.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, now after this year, here's the thing. Because the thing is though, like they don't really have a big cap. The only big cap numbers that are coming off after this year, like they're not going to re-sign. They're not going to the fan mutual option, which is now 12 million, is not happening. Kike, I guess, has one more year at 10. And if like, say Rafaela develops to the point you're okay with him being the center fielder or batting ninth, like you don't need to re-sign Hernandez and that's 10 million you can play with. But like, other than that, like the only other money that might come off the books is Matt Barnes'S contract because that's an $8 million club option in 2024, which
I don't
like,
think is getting picked up. Yeah,
if he pitches like even at end of year, it's not useful getting picked Barnes.
Up. It doesn't matter. I don't think that's getting picked up.
I think it only gets picked up if he turns back into like 2020 Barnes.
I'm not sure it even gets picked up if it does that. Yeah, I just think relievers that's too much for a guy with his volatility.
But that said, that's at most 18 million.
That is interesting, though. That was a good. I didn't realize that. They don't have a lot of money coming off the cap after this, which is crazy that the number is so high. How is it so high?
What's that?
How is their like CBT number so high?
The Red Sox?
Yeah, like they have what
for this this year?
For this coming year, they have what 80 million under like the floor or whatever, the 200 something
under the first level. Yeah.
Where's that 160 million or whatever going? like,
well, it's contracts that are on the books.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like it's Chris Sale's 27.5.
Yeah, those two are 50. Hosmer's minimum, but
Kike's 10. It's Story's 20. It's not Hosmer, I guess. But yeah, it's weird.
I don't know. Just I feel like they should have more.
It's our projections.
No,
like
I know
Devers.
It's a lot of that, but I feel like they should have more. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they also have a ton of room. Well, and then there's also like 15 is like player benefits.
Yeah, true.
So that's the number you never think of, and it's actually like surprisingly high. So, yeah, we'll see what they do. I guess what they have done is churn the back end of the roster. And by the way, another PSA: don't be the guy on Twitter that says "cue the duck boats." Okay, these moves happen because of the way the Major League timeline works. Sometimes they happen before the big moves. So relax, Francis. Since our last episode, the Red Sox claimed Caleb Hamilton and DFA'd Abraham Almonte. We hardly knew you. And claimed Jake Reed from Baltimore and DFA'd Edward Bizzardo. Hitting those two really quick because I don't think either move really is worth much discussion. Hamilton is essentially a third catcher on the roster. Will not project to start the year in the majors. And to me, I think it speaks to, even with the fourth option year for Ronaldo Hernandez, I think this kind of shows that he's not the type of guy that you are super comfortable going into the year with him as the third catcher who would be up and down, just because with the defensive situation there.
No, you usually teams want with that third catcher, you want someone who you don't really care if they can hit or not. You just want them to be able to come up and
that's what he is. And that's what he is.
Hamilton's fine. Like, it's,
his
arm is not great. That's like below average pop times, but he can hit lefties well. I think he hit like over 300 against lefties this season in the minors with like a 600 slugging.
There you go.
And he's good framer, especially at the bottom of the zone. Grades out pretty well there, and he's good at receiving, and that's why he you claim someone like him. And as I was talking to someone about it in baseball, and it's just like they basically were like, yeah, it makes sense to me. You can never have enough catching depth, and that if you look in the high minors, they just don't have a lot of it. Beyond Ronaldo Hernandez, who, as we've talked about, I don't think will ever reach the level defensively that you'd be comfortable throwing him out there in major league games consistently. They don't really have anyone who even has like a major league grade on them. So I completely get, like, when you have the opportunity to add someone like Hamilton for depth for nothing, you jump at that.
Might as well.
I was just trying to bring up his splits. Where's this? Oh, here it is. Just to because they were actually, I was very surprised when I saw them.
This was news to me, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
They were, 1 second. This year against lefties, he hit 308, 411, 615.
What's the sample size?
110 plate appearance, or 108 plate appearances.
In
8
AAA?
home runs. Yeah.
Nice.
So
okay.
He had
I can take that.
OPS of over 1,000 against lefties. Against righties, he hit 158, 319, 293. So
that's bad.
Yeah, it's very bad. So but like, if you can play defense and hit lefties, that's more than serviceable enough to keep a 40-man spot as a third catcher, in my opinion. So
sure. And look, what you do is you add him now. If he makes it through the offseason, cool. If he doesn't, you have lost nothing.
And you have time to find a replacement. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Abraham Almonte, I think we all knew he was going to be the first one DFA'd.
Yeah, that was inevitable. And then
inevitable. And then the other move, yes, Jake Reed for Edward Bizzardo. The initial reaction that I saw from a number of the people who are responding to the Sox prospects account tweeting it was, wait, why Bizzardo? Like, he was pretty good when he was up. He was okay when he was up. He was not pitching anything close to leverage innings. There was a crew that was like Bizzardo, Herman, and Ort. And then like when he came up, Darwinzon, that was like the mop up crew. And like Kelly had kind of graduated out of that crew and was with like the Barnes'S, Strom, Brazier group that like actually pitched when games were close. It's just, you could see like in games that like those relievers pitched in, the Bizzardo, Herman group, like they were all pitching in the games together, and Ort. And Ort would occasionally pitch like kind of close games, but he's fungible relief pitcher depth.
Yeah. And I think that, yes, his overall numbers, like I think his ERA was like,
his ERA was fine. It was
two something. But like 11 strikeouts,
leverage index?
11, I don't know, 11 strikeouts in 16 innings. Like the K rate, the K percentage just this year, it's fine. Like, and the type of pitcher he is now with his since his injury, like the velo's back for the most part, not all the way. but it's not anything more than like an 11th or 12th guy on the staff. Like he's, one of the last relievers on your roster, in my opinion. And that's the kind of guy you can churn and burn. You can you keep him for a bit. If it works out, you get a look, you see where your scouts think, see where your analytics people think. And if if they don't have high grades on it, DFA him, and you claim someone like Reed, who, he pitched for a bunch of teams this year on the Mets, the Dodgers, and the Orioles. Weird arm slot. Like maybe you can unlock something with him. Kind of like
slings it like with sidearm-ish.
Like what they did, like Schreiber, they turned into like obviously a very good pitcher from a weird arm slot. Like there's always a chance with that. And I think Bizzardo it kind of is what he is. Like it's fine, but I didn't think his 40-man spot was that secure. So I'm not that surprised to see him DFA'd.
No, because we had kind of an internal projection we were discussing. I think we had him in the pick 2 group, right? I'm fairly certain that we had him in that group.
In the what?
The like pick 2 of the following group.
Oh yeah, I didn't think there was any chance I thought his best chance.
Well, yeah. So we projected. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that I would not have projected him to be even on the major league staff next year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If he was going to make it, it was going to be starting the year in AAA. No question.
The problem with that to me is I wouldn't have wanted, like, I'm not going to tie up a 40-man spot on a righty reliever.
Right. Well, I think you need guys who can go up and down, but your point makes sense. But yeah, I mean, like we projected the 12, 27, like 30, the 38 guys, including placeholders for like acquisitions they are absolutely going to make. Like we had 3 pitchers, a shortstop, and a right and an outfielder probably getting added. And then we had pick 2 from a group that included like Darwinzon Hernandez, Edward Bizzardo, Jalen Davis, Caleb Ort, Tyler Danish, added Caleb Ferguson to it, Franchi Cordero, Josh Taylor, Ryan Brazier, Yu Chang. Like you cannot keep all of these people. You can keep at most 2. Right. And so if that's the case, like, yeah, like I get Bizarre. Like, look, could they have DFA'd Tyler Danish first? Yeah, maybe. Who cares? They're both getting DFA'd probably. Like, it's not a big deal. And then you already mentioned Reed, so we won't belabor the point. But that's all that's really happened since the last episode. Oh, the other thing that has happened is I think is that Jalen Davis elected free agency as a player who was outrighted twice. You can either elect to collect free agency at the time or wait and do so at the end of the year, like following the end of the regular season. And he did the latter. Like there was a group of guys that on October the 6th elected to become free agents, and he was one. So happy trails, Jalen Davis. Anything else, Ian? Oh, I guess we could do an update on fall and winter leagues really quick. The Arizona Fall League and Mexican Pacific Leagues have started. In the Arizona Fall League, the hitters are hitting and the pitchers are struggling a bit. On the hitting side, Nick York's been pretty good, 300 average, 810 OPS. He's got the OBP higher than the slugging, but has looked pretty good. Nico Cavadas has a 611 on base. And actually, we have a question about this later, so we'll get to that. But all the hitters are hitting. Steven Scott's been pretty good. I think he's the only one with a home run of the group. The only one that hasn't been hitting is Will Abreu, who's got a 375 OPS, but we're talking sample sizes of fewer than 20 at bats. With the exception of York, who's got 30. He's playing close to every day. It's interesting. On the pitching side, actually, probably the biggest news of the last week, Ian, was Thaddeus Ward left his second start with a left oblique strain. And so we don't know if he is going to pitch again in the AFL at this time, per Alex Spear with that report. So obviously a bit disappointing if he's not able to build some more innings in the Arizona Fall League, but obviously the more important thing is to make sure that oblique strain is okay. For the relievers, I mean, they're on their like third appearance, so I'm not even going to go there. Whatever.
Yeah, and I think the AFL is a tough pitching environment, especially when you're sending like younger guys. Like I was looking at, it wasn't the Red Sox team. One of the team ERAs had like, I think Baseball America tweeted out had a bunch of guys in like the 20s.
Yeah,
it's a hitting environment.
100%. In Mexico, the Red Sox don't have anybody, so that's one league we won't need to keep an eye on. There are some old friends down there. Reynaldo Rodriguez is down there. Derek Loop for the old heads. Ali Solis. Some kind of random names, but no one big. The big ones are going to be starting soon. On October 15th, the Dominican Winter League starts. So that's this coming Saturday. And then on October 22nd, the Venezuelan League starts. And then on November 11th, the Puerto Rican League starts. And those are really the bigger ones for the Red Sox because they don't have anyone in Mexico. So, and I guess the one last thing is that the fall performance program for this year was officially canceled because of the damage in Fort Myers from hurricane we won't name. Obviously a terrible situation down there in Fort Myers. Makes sense that they just bagged it. Unfortunately, you can see who was going to go on our fall winter page, but obviously they shut it down. So that's the fall winter update for now. We'll obviously have more as the offseason goes on. Shall we move on to our season in review, Ian? The 22 in review series, part 2, looking at low minors pitching. I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
No, I said sure. That was it.
Oh, okay, cool. Low minors. So last time we got through the guys who started the year in Double-A or higher, and there was plenty to talk about there. I think, Ian, less to talk about with the low minors than the high minors, not necessarily meaning it is worse, just that there's maybe a little less happening. To me, the headliner for 22 in pitching in the low minors has got to be the breakout of Luis Perales. And I think you would agree with that. You're the big Morales backer on the staff. So why don't you talk a little bit about why that's important and what he showed this year?
Yeah, I have him the highest of all of us. I think I have him in the top 10 of the system. And I think that he has the raw stuff that they just don't have with guys in the system anywhere for the most part. Like, he's the type of guy that scouts are throwing like potentially like 360 pitches on, 355, 55 or better pitches. And they just don't have a lot of guys like that. Like it's potential for premium fastball, and 2 secondary pitches that you can put plus grades on. And yeah, I mean, there was a reason I think that, when you looked at the top, kind of like he was one of the, I think he was Baseball America Academies, it was either their first or second ranked. Can't remember, pitching prospect in the FCL. I talked to multiple scouts who said he was the best pitcher they saw down there. And yeah, it's just, it's the kind of electric arm that the Red Sox have struggled to develop from Latin America over the last couple of years. And he's got a chance to start. Obviously, that's the big question right now, but it's the kind of stuff that you can see really playing in the bullpen if it doesn't work out as a starter. And I think most importantly to me is just he has the kind of stuff that you can project to like that works in the playoffs or that works, it's easy he's not going to be a tweener. Like if health permits him to get up to the big leagues, it's going to be as either a starter or a late inning reliever. He's got that kind of stuff that that's what teams are looking for these days. And I think it's hard to find that. Like, the Red Sox, as you said, like there's not a lot of depth in the low minors right now. And he's one of the few guys with that significant ceiling. And I think, beyond him, you get into a bunch of guys that you're projecting, you need a lot of physical development there, or you're getting a bunch of guys who are relievers. And yeah, it's just, it was nice. It was good to see him separating himself from everyone else and kind of creating his own little tier in that group as someone who obviously has significant potential. But he's not the only one. I mean, obviously Wilcom and Gonzalez also is a very interesting guy, but I think that Perales is definitely the headliner.
Yeah, and to me, when I kind of look at it at a big picture sense at the system, looking at it by level, not saying in the rankings, you have all the guys we talked about last week, where there are a lot of bodies who probably will pitch innings in the majors, right? What those innings are, how high leverage they are they starter innings or not, I think is left to be determined, of course, but they're going to pitch in the majors. And I think then you have something of a gap where, you look at the Portland rotation at the end of the year, when they were in the playoffs, it was Shane Drohan and Thaddeus Ward 1-2. And then after that, it was like Brian Van Bell or Sterling Sharp, right? It was just kind of, throw your hands up and I don't know. They called up Wyatt Olds and Shi Jung Lu to take starts at the end of the year just to like set the rotation up. The Greenville Drive pitching staff all year was pretty bad. Let's call a spade a spade. They just were not very good this year. At the end of the year, they had Wilkelman Gonzalez up, and they had a couple of guys who had moved up from Salem, Juan Encarnacion, who's, okay. Wyatt Olds looks like a future reliever, potentially a pretty good one, but he's a future reliever. Jacob Webb was there. Luis Guerrero was there for two guys who were already in the bullpen. But those pitching staffs were kind of, at the end of the year looking kind of weak. But you have this group coming up behind, led by Perales, that has Wickelman like a level ahead. And at the Salem level, guys who are there for some of all of this year. Nathaniel Cruz, Alma Rodriguez Cruz made it up from the Florida Complex League. Hunter Dobbins looked okay. He might be a reliever. Rita Senna, who was hurt for a decent amount of the year, but is an interesting arm. Some other guys who made it up from or I guess Angel Bastardo is the other guy we should mention, who's like kind of interesting, probably a reliever, but an interesting arm. Guys who spent most of the year in the Complex League were Elmer Rodriguez Cruz, Jetixon Paez was there all year. Jose Ramirez is an interesting guy who is there for almost all of the year. Yodani Monegro is interesting-ish. There's a crew of arms that they're not all Perales, right? They're not even all Wickelman Gonzalez, but you could see one or two of them maybe popping into that kind of, 20s on our rankings group. And then, can they maybe pop again into that teens group? There are guys who are interesting down there. We've talked about Paez, Ian, about how like, if he adds a couple more miles per hour on the fastball, he gets really interesting. There are guys who have a lot to work on, and it's interesting now with no short season A ball. The jump from the complex to Salem just looks very different, especially for those kind of guys. You're going to have guys who do things like repeat the complex league, and it's not the end of the world. But to me, it's an interesting group that is developing there and coming up, that behind this sort of bubble. And I think they're doing a better job of identifying interesting arms to develop and move up in that kind of space.
Yeah, and I also think that Wickelman Gonzalez deserves to be talked about, because I feel like he got like kind of he had a rough first half. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. And I think that part of that was just, I think his delivery backed up a little bit because his athleticism. I think he got a little too bulky over the offseason. And I think, though, that I was impressed with what he did after his promotion and kind of like the changes he made kind of after that All-Star break. Because when was it? The All-Star break was like the end of July, right?
Yeah, or mid-July. I
think it was, but like
mid to late. But at any rate, like, because it was funny. Did you take video when you saw him in Greenville?
Yeah, I have.
Because I remember looking at it and being like, he has cleaned up his mechanics so much.
Yeah, like the delivery looked a lot better than what I saw when I saw him in spring training.
Yep.
And like if you take like obviously arbitrary endpoints, but I think this is the All-Star break because there's a 2-week gap between him pitching. 37 innings, 23 hits, 13 walks, 46 strikeouts, 176 opponent batting average, 278 OBP, 214 slug. Gave up no home runs, no triples, just 5 doubles and 131 at bats. Like, that's a really good stretch for him. Obviously the walks are a tad high for what you'd like, but 46 strikeouts in 37 innings, minimized contact, like 61% strike rate. Swinging strike rate was a little low, but yeah, I was encouraged by what I saw from him when I saw him in Greenville. And I think that while he might not have like the ceiling that we originally thought, especially I think part of it is like due to the delivery, part is due to the physical, just he's not that big. Mm-hmm. I still think that there's potential for like a very useful pitcher there. And like he's someone where the stuff is there's still, legit stuff in there. Mm-hmm. So I think that he did a good job of kind of like reestablishing himself. And he's not he's not a top 10 guy for me, but he's like right on that borderline of the top 10. And in that, kind of that second, third tier of pitching prospects behind, obviously, now that Bayo's graduated, I guess Mata's the top guy, but he kind of belongs to me like right below that like Mata, Walter, Perales group. He's kind of that fourth guy to me.
Yeah, and the gap you're looking at is absolutely the All-Star break. The All-Star break was the 18th to the 21st.
That's what I thought. I wasn't 100% sure.
And I mean, even if you just looking at like his innings pitched in his outings going into the break, right? Like his five outings before the break were like 3 2/3, 4 innings, 4 2/3, 3 1/3, 2 innings, right? So he's not really getting deep into games. He comes out of the break with 4, 5, 5, 6 promotion. Right. And that's just kind of like he's getting in there, he's turning the lineup over, he's not running into a big inning, and they got him up. Right. So, I think that there were definitely tweaks there. And he actually had a fair amount of time, as you mentioned. Like he threw like he would have started the first game of the All-Star break in the normal rotation slot, and they actually he also was the fourth starter after the break. So he had a lot of time to work on things. And maybe that's when he did work on stuff. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, the rest of the guys there, it's interesting to, it's a lot of keep an eye ons is what I guess I would call them, Ian, the guys that I mentioned before. And then it's probably worth mentioning, just to mention, there are a number of arms who pitched really well in the Dominican Summer League. We were talking about this earlier. You almost have to take it. You have to literally take it with an enormous grain of salt until you see the guys in the United States, because I can still remember guys like Denny Reyes, who had tremendous K to walk numbers in the DSL. And he came over and he was like, what is he, like 6'5", big guy. And then he gets on the mound and it's like 89 to 91, if that.
Well, no. When he first came over, it was like 84 to 86.
Was it that low? Okay, yeah. I didn't want to overstate
it. Was like,
okay,
he was like mid 80s.
Yeah, and you just got on the mound and everyone just like, oh, damn. But like the Red Sox, I mean, the number of starters they had with ERAs below 2. Names like Inmer Lobo, who ended the year hurt, Christian Nunez, who was going to come over for the fall performance program. Yisrael Burnett got hurt. Luis Cohen had a little bit of a higher ERA, but he had a pretty good year. On the other DSL team, you had names like William Colmenares, Eberson Polanco. Who else had a good year over there? I mean, the thing is, you got to be careful with those numbers, because some of these guys are like 21 and 22-year-old relievers who literally were just on the roster to eat innings and finish games. So, we really just kind of take a flyer on guys until they get to the U.S. But it looks like there's potential for a number of arms down there who could come over and surprise us. I mean, and there's always guys who come over and you're like, wait, this guy came over, and then he's like kind of interesting. So, yeah. But I don't know. Anything else on the low minors, guys? Ian, like I said, there's not as much to say just because we don't have the base with them. But I don't know if you've got any kind of final parting thoughts on that group.
No, I think what you said is I think is pretty spot on, and I just think that like even looking at the rankings, you can see there's a pretty big like tiers, like where we have them just the combined rankings, like Gonzalez and Perales are in the top 15. Then you have a drop off, and then you have Elmer and Paez are like in like the 30 to 32, 30, 31 range. And then after that, you get down into like a bunch of guys who are relievers, or probably future relievers like Bastardo, Uberstein, Guerrero, guys like that. So
yeah, we didn't even mention Uberstein. That's a good point too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, shall we move on to emails then and close the show out, my friend? All right. Again, if you want to send us an email, send an email to podcast@soxprospects.com. And our first email this week, Ian, comes from our friend Andrew, who says, Bloom mentioned in his post-year press conference that where the Red Sox are with the depth of the system, making trades is, quote, more likely, end quote. This is probably, we should have talked about this too. So I'm glad he asked about it. My question is, assuming potential studs like Marcelo Meyer and Miguel Blaze are off the table, what would you guess would be possible to acquire with the pieces they have available in the 4 to 20 range of prospects? Could Nick York with other goodies add up to Shane Bieber? Would Rafael help net you at Brian Reynolds or Sean Murphy? Or should we be setting our sights lower? I'd love to hear your takes on what the quote extra end quote guys in the farm system could likely fetch. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for the email, Andrew. It kind of gets to what we were talking about earlier, but yeah, he did also say, and we should have mentioned this, that like they think they have built the depth enough that they can maybe use it to make some moves, which squares with what we've been saying they've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, they're like a borderline top 10 system in the game now. Like, you can
do more.
You can do stuff with that.
Yep.
They have guys teams will want beyond obviously their top few. And like, I think that Meyer and Blaze would be very difficult to trade.
Yeah.
And obviously Costas is going to be on the big league team, so I don't think he's getting traded. But beyond those three, I don't think there's anyone that I wouldn't rule out getting moved this offseason.
100%. 100%. What could you see them like? I think if they're going to make a big splash trade, I think it's with pitching.
What, to acquire pitching or
to acquire pitching? No, to acquire. If they're because I can't see them trading for like they need a shortstop.
See,
the way the market is this offseason,
I think the one I could see them trading for an outfielder. I just don't like.
I guess I could see outfield market. Too. Like, that's true. If you don't if you don't get Nimmo, it's like yeah.
Do you really want to spend that much money on like
and lose
Mitch
a pick?
Haniger or like
not lose a pick?
Not lose a pick. But like, do you want to spend that much money on Mitch Haniger? Like,
yeah,
like that's where like the guy that I keep coming back to and is Brian Reynolds in Pittsburgh. I know it would take a lot.
Yeah,
but like. He's getting, I think he's R1 this season, I want to say.
I'll look.
But I just think that I think he's a very good player. Like you look at his OPS plus the last, 4 seasons since he got up to the big leagues with 130, 71, 145, 126, 27 home runs this year, 345 OBP, obviously down average year for him, but you're putting up, a 345 OBP. You can kind of carry that. And I just think that he's someone that could be available if Pittsburgh kind of sees the writing on the wall that he doesn't fit their timeline that well. He's a free agent in 2026. So that's what, so this is his first ARB year then. Right.
The spreadsheet is loading for whatever reason. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Brian Reynolds. Where the heck is he? Why is he not? Oh yeah, here he is. He is ARB2 next year. Oh no, he signed a 2-year, $13 million deal.
He signed a deal that bought out some of his ARB years.
So he's got 2 years after that. So he's only on a $6.7 million AAV
he signed a 2-year, $13 million deal that covered this year and next year.
Yep.
Okay, so anyway, but like
so then he's got ARB3 in 2024, and he apparently is a super. He's apparently a super.
So he is a fifth ARB year or fourth ARB year. Yeah. Okay.
25.
So they got. So he would have 3 years of team control. 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 3 years of team control.
Yep.
Like that's the type of guy I could see, like, you will be willing to trade for. And obviously it would require a lot, but like, I feel like you could put something together that doesn't include Meyer or Blaze for him with like Rafael Amata, like, and a few other guys.
I could see Rafaela being intriguing to them. Rafael Amata, and I mean, we would need another top guy, not top, but like you couldn't throw in like Anhel Bastardo.
No, it would be. I think it would be like 2 more guys, like both like decent prospects. Like, but anyway, just like that was the name that came to mind because I just looking at the outfield market, I was not impressed.
I could see that.
I could definitely see that. I kind of think that I don't know. I'm kind of scared of trading for pitching. Like, I just think pitching is so volatile, and we've seen like how.
No, that's fair.
It's worked out with like trading all that. Like Sale obviously has had his good stuff, and now he's struggling. Like. In my opinion, I would rather just go out and spend the money on free agency, and that way you're minimizing your risk when it comes to pitching. Like you're just spending money, you're not actually having to trade prospect capital. Also, versus I'm more comfortable trading for position players. In my opinion,
that's so the reason
how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean the reason the Sale trade was so perfect is that it was a trade for pitching, also at like an incredible value money wise. So you're more willing to spend prospect capital to acquire a true front of the line starter, not being paid like a front of the line starter, right? Like that was part of why that trade was so particularly attractive. The reason I said pitching is they need so much, and I don't know what the market really looks like there either. Like I could see, for example, like I mean, I hate to trade for a reliever, but it's like if you can get a decent reliever in a trade to buttress like 1 or 2 guys you signed, right?
Yeah, but I think it's you can trade for a reliever. It's a lot easier than trading for starting pitching is just prohibitively expensive, and it has been. Like look at what the deadline deals were, like Frank Montas, like guys like that.
The Castillo deal where the Mariners gave up Noel V. Marte, and who else was it?
Edwin Arroyo is another top 5 guy in their system, and then 2 or 3 other guys. Like, it's prohibitively expensive.
Paying off, but
Right.
Although they're down 2-0, but
Castillo pitched well today. I mean, that home run by Alvarez was stupid. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do when you dot 100 like on the outside 100 corner
on the black.
Yeah, well, it's like it wasn't even on the strike. It wasn't even on the it wasn't even off on the plate. It was like 6 inches off the plate. It was a perfect pitch.
Yeah, I don't know if it was. It looked like it was like 3 inches off, but like I mean, you're right. It was off the plate. I was wrong.
Spot. It was exactly where he wanted to throw it. And Alvarez just threw his hands at it and hit it like 400 feet. Like I don't know what you're supposed to do with that, but like yeah. Do you want to say your point? Can you say it? Your Alvarez point? No.
Do it.
No.
Do it.
I'm not.
Do it.
No.
Yes. Come on.
No.
Grow a set. Whatever. Fine. Okay.
All I'll say on Alvarez is it shows how good the Dodgers machine is that they can make that bad of a trade and just no one even remembers it. Fair. Yeah. Like, because that was a horrific trade for them. And
can you imagine if the Red Sox did that?
Well, but it's like they traded Yordan Alvarez for nothing basically, and no one cares. Like
they traded Yordan Alvarez for a guy the Red Sox were okay losing in the Rule 5 draft.
And but no one brings it up because they just have a machine over there. Right. Like their development machine is absurd. But anyway,
that's an interesting, by the way, a thought experiment on like a reconstructed history. If they keep Yordan Alvarez, I could see a lot of the butterfly effect from that is interesting to think about, but maybe we'll go there later. But I mean, so I just going and getting starting pitching. I mean, look, I can't see them being players for like DeGrom, and we'll get into this more after the World Series, but
I just think the starting
I could see them making moves.
The starting pitching market is a lot more robust to me in free agency than the outfield market is. So that's why I just think that outfield could be something they look to address via trade, whereas starting pitching they can upgrade in free agency. I think there are several guys I like who I think will be readily, they could be in the ballpark for pitching wise.
Next email comes from Will, who says, "What is up with these wacky AFL hitting stats? It seems lots of hitters have more walks than strikeouts through the first week of games. The lowest team OBP is 371. He sent this 5 days ago. That includes Nick York, who has a 5-2 walk to K ratio so far in over 20 plate appearances, or so far in 20 plate appearances. Small sample size is part of it. Just give it a chance to play out. The other thing is it is a hitter friendly environment, and its pitchers trying not to give up a long ball, I think, is part of it too. But it's small sample size. We're at that point where we're talking a week's worth of stats. So our next email comes from Barry, who says, looking at who could be available for free agents starting pitchers this coming offseason, right on cue, and not being super excited, I wanted to get your opinion on acquiring pitchers with upside. My thought was Brady Singer from KC. He looks like he has figured it out this season. And being he's already 26 and on KC, could be a good player to grab before he's due to get paid. He was a high value draft pick and could be a good option with high upside. Would Singer be a realistic option? Do you have a different name of a player they can acquire? And what would it take for the Sox to acquire a player like this? He says prospect. I think he means player. Thanks for the great content, Barry. Ian, I'm interested in your thoughts. Singer doesn't strike me as a high value ad necessarily.
No, he's someone who his like baseball card numbers are decent, like 3.23 ERA, 10-5, 150 strikeouts and 153 innings, 1.14 WHIP. But his advanced numbers are not great. Like if you could look at his StatCast page, for example, it's a lot of blue. Doesn't get chases, gets hit pretty hard. He doesn't walk anyone, which is obviously good. He has good extension, good fastball spin, but like there's a lot of metrics that don't love him going forward. But like, sure, like I mean, depending on the price, like obviously you be willing to take a gamble, take a shot on anyone. But I just think the Royals are going to be a tough. Like he's going to be 26 next year. Doesn't strike me as someone they would want to trade.
Old, like he says 26, like that's old. That's not old.
No,
like,
I don't mean it like he was old. I meant
no. I know you don't. I'm saying the email makes it sound like he's already 26, and I'm like, well, that's not that old.
Like they have a bunch of guys like matriculating up to the MLB team or that did this year who were early in their careers that I think they're going to want to kind of have a good team to or at least some good arms to build around because most of those guys are hitters. And I think the wild card thing is they're going to have a new front office. Like, who knows? Like, that's true. There hasn't been any change there front office wise in years. I think Dave Moore was there for 12 years before
he was there
or something.
For a long time. Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
So it's like, I feel like it's very hard to so he was there, Jesus, no, longer than that. He was there for 15 years, 2006 to 21. So it's I think it's, or to 22 actually. I think it's hard to know what their plan is until they hire someone new, and I don't think they've hired anyone new yet.
Yeah,
as far
they
as
haven't.
I was just
Like,
looking,
I know they interviewed one internal candidate, but
I don't think they've made
or
that.
no,
Hire
I'm thinking of the Rangers with the
They hire is
manager
JJ
position.
Piccolo. Did they hire him? Oh no, they did. Yeah, JJ Piccolo is the new.
Oh, okay, I missed that.
Yeah, so he was promoted. But yeah, so it's going to be, they fired the manager also. That's who I was thinking of. But anyway, we don't know what his like plan is or what his vision for the team is. So I think it's hard to kind of pinpoint certain trade guys like that. But I think, like, as we said, like we talked about in the last email, like if you're talking about specifically about pitching, I haven't really dove into the potential trade market yet for that. I feel like that's something we'll talk about once the World Series is over and we kind of get into the offseason, or we're getting it, that offseason preview discussion. But yeah, like Reynolds obviously was someone I kind of had my eye on. I feel like he always gets mentioned in trade rumors, and he's someone I'd be interested in.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, our next email comes from Chris, who asks, "Thank you for all you guys do. This year is a great example of you providing content. We need to take our minds off the big club scuffling all year. It also gives us insight into these players filling in due to the avalanche of injuries. A question I've always wondered about: are there some benchmarks for player advancement that are relatively common for players, assuming they are having success, be it innings at bats, games played, et cetera? Or is it just, quote, I'll know it's time to move them when I see it, end quote, type thing? Thank you." As we've talked about a little bit, it's, you start looking for a guy to potentially move up, like benchmarks in terms of like, there's no, when the guy hits this many innings, he moves up. Right. Like that's just not how it works. You need to show that you are ready for the next level. That said, a guy's not going to advance to the next level if he hasn't hit like 200 or 250 plate appearances. Like that's on the low end. Pitching wise, you're probably looking at 80-ish innings, Ian, I think, something like that before you're realistically going to move up. That's assuming you're a starter. Relievers are a whole different animal, of course, but it's all kind of relative. If you're an older player, you're going to move quicker than a younger guy, no matter what success you're having. If you're at a given position, so for example, a guy like Nico Cavadas is going to move quick because he's a player profile type that's not really going to be challenged until he gets to the high minors. And sure enough, that's what happened. Now, like I said, when I say that, I like to caveat, we didn't necessarily see Cavadas, having an offensive player of the year in the system type year. But that said, like, if you had told me that entering the year, I wouldn't have called you crazy. Because he's going to start the year in low A and he's going to move up to high A, and he's probably going to be too advanced for both levels with his plate approach. So I don't know that there's any hard and fast benchmarks, Ian. It's not like, before you move out of low A, you need to have a 50 grade fastball or something. Like I don't know that there's benchmarks so much as it's just kind of like depends on the player. It's unique player to player, and that's kind of part of the challenge of player development.
Yeah, I agree. I think you nailed it. It's a case by case basis, and it's a lot of it's like age dependent, but it's mostly player dependent. Like no two developments are alike, and I think that that's part of what makes it fun and interesting, but it's also what makes it so difficult and why it's like it's so hard to know when someone is going to be ready, when someone's going to force the issue, things like that. You're kind of just it's a lot of wait and see. And some guys can handle it, some guys can't. Some guys take longer, some guys excel immediately, and then they maybe struggle with the adjustments. Some guys the other way. It's just it's a lot. It just varies significantly from player to player.
100%. Our next question comes from Austin, who asks, "I was looking at the 2023 projected rosters and the amount of guys who could play shortstop, but will have limited reps because of other better options. My question is, does it benefit a player's value more to be average at shortstop or above average at second, third, or corner outfield? For example, do we look at Matthew Lugo differently if he's an above average third baseman defensively versus his 40 shortstop? Have a great offseason, Austin." A good question, Austin. And Lugo's a great example because by the time you got to Greenville, Ian, he had moved off shortstop, and he was basically the regular third baseman in Greenville, although it was interesting because he went up briefly to Portland when they needed a couple bodies at the very end of the year, and he was playing second, I think, or he played like second once and third once. So him playing third in Greenville might have just been a function of who else was on the roster. Um, it's interesting because I think about this and I think of like Salem this year, actually, where they had Meyer as the everyday shortstop on a roster with Briner Bonacy and Edinson Paulino, who on a different roster would have been the everyday shortstop, or could have, I should say. But instead, Bonacy is bouncing back and forth between second and short, and Paulino is bouncing between second, third, short, playing some outfield, bouncing around. I mean, look, in an ideal world, you would get everyone reps at the top of the defensive spectrum position they can handle. But that said, how many of those guys are going to stick it short? So I think getting Paulino reps at other positions helps. Look, you could have said this coming out of last season about, say, Don Rafaela, right? Like, he was an infielder who they gave some reps in the outfield. It's like, oh crap, he's already a 70 defender in center field, right? Like, sometimes you stumble into that, and a guy just has an aptitude. You don't count on that because that's pretty atypical. But I think we always have this, like, look at how many shortstops there are, and it just never winds up being a problem. Is really how I feel about it, Ian. I don't know if you've got thoughts on that with like log jams at a given position.
Oh, no, I think that it kind of just tends to work itself out. Either a guy proves that he needs to be moved off the position, or the team moves him off it. As kind of, I think we're seeing with Lugo, it's a little bit of both maybe. But just as the general question, I think his last question was like, what's more valuable, a 40 shortstop or a above average defender at third? But was that the end of his question? I think it was. Yep. Yeah, you're taking the above average at third. And
do you think that applies to Lugo? I think that sounds about right. I don't think he was a 40 shortstop, or if he's
he might have been
40, 45. And I was about to say too, I agree with you.
I think though it's
above average third.
We got to remember with Lugo though, that like if you're, fringy in low A or high A, it probably isn't going to get any better when the speed of the game picks up and, you get up to the big league level. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it's worth definitely a look at third. He looked way more comfortable at third than what I heard from scouts who saw him at shortstop. I'm not sure it gets to a 55, even a third. I think it's closer to a 50, but yeah, you're going to take the guy a 50 at third over a 40 at shortstop any day of the week.
And for what it's worth, when you're valuing a guy and he's playing shortstop, you're accounting for how likely it is he's going to stay at the position.
Yeah, right? And I shouldn't say any day of the week. That was probably a little harsh, just because like there's certain exceptions where like if a guy is like a 150 hitter and an average defender at third, and a guy is like a good hitter at shortstop at a 40, you're going to take the shortstop. But I think what the emailer was getting at is like the same player being.
Yeah. Oh, that's what he's saying. Literally Lugo.
Yeah. You're going to move the guy to the position, especially when you're talking about an up the middle position. I think you need to the bar for defense is so much higher at shortstop, center field, catcher, second base specifically, more so shortstop, center field, and catcher, I think though.
Well, and I actually would say second base now is again with
with the shift changes. I do think you're right. Second base will matter again because like this is an aside back to Xander Bogaerts, but it was really interesting looking at his defensive metrics. All of his value
on Baseball Savant.
Yeah, all of his value. When you looked at the pie chart, it was all when he was having to go like nowhere, playing that second base role with a guy in deep second base, like behind him. Like that was where his best.
Was really interesting.
And it was kind of eye opening that it's like, yeah, he had really good, like overall his WAR numbers from defense were good. And it was all aided by the shift. Like as a shortstop, he was like negative outs above average. It's just a pure shortstop.
Yeah, it was like, it's above average at short, negative at second and third, both positive, and like second in particular.
Second was like plus 5, but it was all specifically that little like gap between when you're like between the base and like where the second baseman normally plays on the infields, which means
place he won't be able to play anymore.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. It was the place that he was only playing because there was another defender way out in the outfield behind him.
Yeah.
And like the place where you arguably had the least, to cover the least amount of range and everything. So,
but it's above average measures, you turning a hit ball into an out.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No,
so still measuring your range, but yeah.
No, what I'm saying is that he had the least responsibilities. Like he had to cover the least amount of distance because like if he missed something going to his left, there was a guy behind him, like things like that. So, no, that was just interesting. And it's something that I think we're going to probably be talking about more in the off season is like, I think there will be more of a premium being placed again on like up the middle defense. because you're not going to be able to shift, obviously. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how that changes the game.
Next email's from Nick. He says, it seems like it's very hard to predict pitchers until they get to above a certain level. For young pitchers, appropriate question for this episode, are there any particular stats or metrics that you really put weight on to identify a player who should be ranked higher and others might think, I think is what he's trying to say. Is there a tool you value above the others, Nick? Ian, I'll let you start on that one if you'd like.
One thing that I love to see from young pitchers is fastball command.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a great example of this is Jeddickson Paez. He's someone who, when you look at his raw stuff, he's not going to jump out of the page when you see him. Like, he's like 89 to 92. When I first saw him, he was 87 to 89, but he could dot a fastball as like a 17-year-old. And that's just not something you see very often. With a lot of guys, they're throwers more than pitchers when they're that young. And he was someone who got on the radar because of his ability to locate. And, he had feel for the breaking ball and everything. But I think, and we're seeing it a lot, frankly, in the playoffs these days. It's like with pitchers, you got to be able to locate. MLB hitters are so good that unless you have premium stuff, the margin for error is very small. You miss your spot by even, 3 inches, it's going to be a hit. And that's why, there's just such a, so many guys, just don't have the command necessary to achieve their ultimate potential. Like, as good as your stuff is, if you don't have the command, you might not even make it out of, you might never establish yourself as a big leaguer. Even if you're throwing like 260, 70 pitches, if you have 30 command, like, it's not going to matter.
Well, look at Chapman when his command goes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he didn't even make the playoff roster. Like,
right. Well, I mean,
there's other reasons, but like, it doesn't matter how good the stuff is with how good hitters have become these days. So, I think fastball command is definitely something I'm looking for. And I think the other thing is, and this is something you can't really like see unless you're going to the games, is like athleticism and delivery. And I think they kind of go hand in hand, and projection. Those three kind of go hand in hand to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, how does like someone look physically? Like Elmer Rodriguez Cruz is like a string meat. Like, he's 6'4", 6'5", 160 pounds right now. But, there's some guys like that, built like that, who don't have a lot of projection. There are others that do. But how do they make it work? How does the delivery work? Like we talked about with Wilkelman Gonzalez earlier in the season, early in the episode, excuse me. Last year, he was a good athlete. Delivery, there was some effort, but I thought it was okay enough. This year, he seemed a little bigger. Delivery was not as good. Then it kind of, as the season went on, he streamlined it a little bit, seemed to get, a little bit looser, a little bit more athletic. And that's all stuff you have to pick up going to the games. I think those are kind of the fastball command. And then that second kind of all encompassing part with the delivery and the athleticism are the two things with young pitchers that I'm looking for the most.
Yep. And then as far as metrics, I mean, like, I'm not like, you got to be careful with statistics in the low minors.
Well, especially like, you can't read anything into DSL statistics because there are going to be guys.
Oh, ignore the DSL.
If you can throw a strike if you can throw a strike in the DSL, like, you can have like a good K to walk ratio, for example. Like, a guy having 40 innings with a 22 to 2 K to walk ratio is just not impressive to me anymore.
Yep.
Like, knowing what I know,
or even with strikeouts, it can be unimpressive. And then there are guys who have very unimpressive DSL stats that come over, and I'm like, we projected this guy to get cut. What is he doing coming over the States? And it's like, oh, he's actually decent and just like needed a minute. You know what I mean? And he's 16 or 17 and needs to grow into his body.
Yeah.
So that's part of it too. But like, I'm not, I'm trusting my eyes when I go to see a guy. Age relative to level, very important. Maybe that's something I would throw out there as a metric, like the context of age relative to level. If a guy is, to use an extreme example, the best pitcher in the system statistically of last year was probably Simon Pacheco in the Dominican Summer League. He had like an ERA below 1, crazy strikeout to walk ratios and strikeouts per inning. He was like 21 or 22 in the Dominican Summer League. So yeah, of course he dominated. That's like a college junior pitching in a high school Legion, summer league. Like, yeah, of course he's going to come in and shove. That's an extreme example, but it proves the point that, like, keep that in mind when you're seeing what guys are doing at a given level. But yeah, I don't know that there's, I'm going to see a guy and seeing what it looks like is really
I think that, like, just as a first glance, when I look at the stat page of low minors pitchers, I'm looking at strikeouts and walks.
And it would be great if you had swinging strikes too. Swinging strikes are maybe
what I'll usually go is I'll go to Baseball Reference and I'll search, get their game logs and get the swinging strike rate from that, because that's another good one too. But but yeah, like I don't think, I'm not looking at that though for like guys in the complex leagues. It's like that's more like a high A low A thing. But if they're at high and low A, I've probably seen them by then. So it's like I'm more trusting of my eye. I think pitching is something that you need. You need to see it. Because those stat lines can be so, like, they can just be very deceiving. Like I just think back of like the long history of like Henry Owens, Anthony Renato. Like there's been a lot of Kyle Hart. There's just been a lot of guys who can put up really good numbers in the high minors. And when you go, and it's just one of those things where the scouting just does not match the stat line. And
no question.
If you see them in person versus you look at their, like, if you look at their stats, you'd be like, "Ooh, this is a really interesting guy." But if you see them in person, you're just like, "No, doesn't do it for me."
Final email comes from Christian, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's another who do you think they might trade for. But the guy that he mentions that we haven't talked about is Zach Gallen, who's interesting. I think that's another one, Ian, that's going to take an arm and a leg to acquire.
If you want Zach Gallen, you're Meyer, Blaze, like at all. You don't. They can pick whatever they want from your system, which is why I also don't see why the Diamondbacks would trade him. They have their top hitting prospects are all getting up to the big leagues now or are up there, and will be kind of like they're counting on them for next year. They finished the season pretty well. I think they were like set. They were close to 500, maybe 75 wins or so this year.
And they've got like Thomas, Corbin Carroll, like you said. Yeah.
Right. Those two guys are up there ready to go. Like they have some good hitters.
Dalton Varsho's.
You're not going to trade like a high end pitcher who can anchor your staff when you're, you want to compete. So I don't think he's someone that will be available. I mean, I could be wrong, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I just can't see them moving. I'm trying to pull up the Fangraphs trade value rankings to see where he is, because I'm sure he's probably on there too. As
I feel like he has a good contract too. Let me look.
Fascinating audio. Okay, here we go. Gallen.
Maybe not.
Okay, so he's 45. He's heading into ARB1.
Yeah, so yeah, he's
45th on their rankings. Yeah, he just fell from 18 to 45,
which is weird
because he's hitting ARB.
Oh, because he's hitting ARB, though.
Because he's hitting ARB. Yeah, exactly.
Because his season this year was so good. Like,
yeah, I mean,
2.5 ERA, whip under 192 strikeouts and 184 innings. Doesn't walk guys. His FIP was 3. Like ERA plus a 158. Yeah, that's a really good season.
Right. So
it's gonna be a fascinating offseason to see. Like,
I want to see what the Red Sox do.
There's so many different routes they could go down. Like, and I feel like I really like when we get closer to the offseason prep episode, like I feel like there's a lot to look at. Like,
if you are a Red Sox fan and you are into this kind of you're into the hot stove league, this is going to be the winner for you. I think they're actually going to be doing a lot of really interesting stuff. Even if they just play it straight. Sign some free agents, right? Maybe make a small move or two, but like just sign 5-6 free agents. Even that alone is going to be interesting to follow and see how they play it.
There's going to be a lot more turnover than we're used to seeing in a given off season. Like I feel like it's not that often that we go into the off season with, 6, 7, 8 big red, acquisitions on our projected roster.
I say that, but then like last year they signed Waka and Hill and Jake Diekman and Matt Strom, and
I feel like last year was weird though. Like this is the thing, and this is
traded for Jackie Bradley, and
we'll end on this. I think though that what has made these last few off seasons weird is just they haven't come after a normal season, or they've had weird things that have disrupted them.
The lockout,
like you had the lockout, you had COVID, like. We haven't had like a tape to tape normal high and bloom off season yet. And that's like they had the one coming off after the COVID season. Like then you had, lockout, then you had the Mookie trade, which because he came in, later, like I want to see what he can do and the whole front office can do, given a normal off season. And I think looks like we're finally going to get that this year. And it happens to coincide when they have a ton of money to spend. And a lot of holes, and it's going to be, a real opportunity for Chaim Bloom, who obviously the front office or the ownership has expressed confidence in, and him and Cora is the duo to lead the Red Sox going forward. And this is his chance to kind of like build his team and his vision, and put the team that he thinks can lead the Red Sox forward and towards like obviously their end goal of competing for a World Series. So it's going to be really interesting to see though how they mold that vision, or how him and the rest of the front office comes together and what they decide is the best way forward. Because obviously this is the make or break off season. Like if you have 125 million to spend and you mess that up, that can set you back for years.
Oh, no question.
You can set yourself up for years. So
yeah, it could go. There's the error bars on how this offseason plays out are, years to come. The effect that this offseason is going to have to it are very wide.
Yeah. Like this is the one where you set the path for the next 3 to 5 years. And that's going to, it's going to be, because it's, what do you do at shortstop for the next 5 years? What do you do at third base with Devers? Like, what are you going to do in the outfield? Like, there's a lot of big questions and big holes that need to be filled. And it's going to be fascinating seeing the routes they go to fill them, because there aren't, clear free agent other than shortstop. There's not like clear free agent, depth to fix those positions. Like catcher, I mean, are they going to go after Wilson Contreras? I could see it. Like maybe you want him to be a catcher. Maybe you try to run 3 catchers on the roster next year
and have
Contreras DH also. Like,
sure.
With outfield, like, as we said, do they go after one of the top guys like Nimmo, or do they go for the trade route? Or do they really just go like bargain hunting with Mitch Haniger, who gets hurt all the time? Like shortstop, if they get Bogarts, or is Bogarts gone and you get one of the other top 3, or worst case scenario, what happens if you miss on all the top guys? Like, there's just a lot of questions and a lot of different pathways. And I mean, I think, it's going to be probably a little stressful, but it's going to be, I think, exciting to follow and kind of, read the rumor mill and see what everyone's hearing and talking about, and, ask and hearing, frankly, what we're hearing too, to see kind of the route they decide to go.
And if you want to follow that all off season, you can do it here on the SoxProspects.com podcast. So thank you all for listening. We're going to wrap up. For Ian, I'm Chris. Thank you for supporting us all season long. Thank you for listening to the show. It's why we do it. Your support and your constantly checking in, sending us all kinds of great questions. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow the site on Twitter and Instagram at Sox Prospects. And on Twitter, you can follow Ian at Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. And follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. We also want to give a shout out to our $5 level Patreon supporters. That list includes Deb Kendall, Andrew Wallen, Lendl Martin, Ernest Shermer, Kyle C., Tyler Woodrow, Patton in New Hampshire, Jeff Trainer, David Nardone, Tim Harding, Bill Stanton, Evan Kirkwood, Chris Fox, James O'Hara, Nathan Kenyon, Ben and R.I., David B., Ben Burnett, Al Mendel, Kevin Catrides, Steve Gregory, James Bailey, Andreas Goldstrand, Corey Perrick, Forrest Perkins, Mark Herman, Brian Cowan, Andrew K., Jeff Harwood, Dusty G., Michael Murphy, Bob Introne, Pavel, Jordan Shabbat, Jeffrey Scruggs, Nicholas Staropoli, Mike Kawano, Chris Bollier, Curtis Waltman, Michael Stewart, Caleb Farron, John Kane, Jason Stoneburner, Jason Parker, Mike Granger, Mike McNiosa, Jeff Richardson, Michael Cullen, John McGee, Nicholas Lanson, Paul Manish, James P. McMahon, Jim Tuttle, Adam Gregory, Brian Rose, Jake O'Donnell, and John Mulqueen. Thank you all for your support, and thank you to all of our listeners for your support. We're not going to be here next week. We're going to take a week off. I'm out of town. We'll be back hopefully the week after, picking up where we left off on 22 in review on the other side of the ball, looking at some hitters. So until then, stay safe out there. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs. I mean, we're going to be back before the end of the playoffs, but enjoy some great playoff baseball in the meantime. Enjoy some fall league stuff. Keep an eye on the news page, news.soxprospects.com, for our fall league updates. And we'll be back in your eardrums soon. Thanks, everybody.